Hello again, it's Buffy. I am here making this video as part of my 300-hour yoga teacher training with Edge Yoga School. Thanks for joining me and allowing me to bring some content to the table as we're all learning together in all things yoga. So this is this part of the nap time series, which I'm recording during my children's nap time. So thanks for the flexibility and for tuning in today. We just started a new segment of this series using the Yamas and Niyamas book by Deborah Adele. Go ahead and pick up a copy if you haven't already. Super easy read, really fun, and like chapter by chapter, which is what we're going to be doing in these videos. We already did the introduction video, so if you didn't catch that, go back a bit and search for that. And we're going to start just with the first jewel, Ahimsa. And what I do in these videos is I've already read through and digested this chapter, and I'm just bringing to you my takeaways and hopefully inspiring you to learn more. All right, Ahimsa means non-violence. It's the first of the 10 jewels in the Yamas and Niyamas. If you remember from the introduction video, the Yamas are things that we want to avoid, and the Niyamas are things we want to bring in to our lives. There's 5 of each. So first we've got to take out in order to bring in. So we've got to clear some space. So we're starting with non-violence. And as I mentioned in the intro, the first thing is to do no harm, always. So the first thing I have highlighted here, when we feel hurried, afraid, powerless, out of balance, and harsh with ourselves, we may find ourselves speaking words of unkindness or even exploding with a violent outburst. That's what I do. Have you ever felt hurried, afraid, powerless, out of balance, or harsh with yourself? And if so, what comes out of you? Usually unkindness, which is violence, right? Using harsh tone or unkind words, like you could have used nicer words. And I wrote here on the side, this was the first time I read through this book, yoga asana for me changes all of that. It just kind of resets when I get on my mat, and just simply moving the body, moving the energy through the body can really combat so much of that hurried feeling, the fear, the powerlessness, feeling out of balance. It's so amazing, and I'm so grateful to have found yoga practice, physical practice too. It's just not only tremendously helped my physical body, but also my mental well-being, my emotional well-being. So I'm so glad you're on the journey with me. Yoga practice helps me, instead of feeling hurried, I feel calm. Instead of feeling afraid, I feel brave. Powerless, instead I feel powerful. Out of balance, instead I feel balanced. And instead of using harsh words with myself, I'm able to find some kindness. Mindful self-compassion exercises have also really been so instrumental in helping me with combating some of these things and helping me to be less violent towards myself, which in effect ripples out and less violent. It's not like I'm out there beating people up, but you know what I mean, like with my words and my attitudes and actions with other people. So I hope to bring you some mindful self-compassion exercises in future videos, but for now we're sticking with Ahimsa, with the Yamas and Niyamas, the non-violence. So we literally, Ahimsa is to do no harm, and it calls us to be our most brilliant and best selves. Our capacity to be nonviolent depends on our proactive practice of courage, balance, love of self, and compassion for others. So the first kind of subtitle here in this chapter is Finding Our Courage. So she talks about courage. In an abundant world, hoarders take more than their share, leaving others lacking. Have you ever watched the show Hoarders? It's really actually quite sad. And I actually know some people who could be considered hoarders. And I myself, it's tempting, especially when things feel scary in the world, like right now, to like want to hoard things to stay safe. You know, you're scared. We'll talk more about fear in just a second. And okay, let's just jump into fear. So the root of that hoarding is fear. It's insecurity. And if you watch that show on, I think it's on like TLC, or if you know anyone who like hoards more than they need as far as stuff or food or whatever, it's usually like, unless it's like a hobby, it's usually based out of something traumatic that happened, or like a fear, an underlying root fear. And fear is what creates violence. Fear creates violence. Fear, we talked about the chakras in previous videos, and I hope you're able to check those out, but our root chakra, our basic needs not being met, if your root is not well established, and then and your like survival needs are not met, you feel afraid. And that's perfectly natural to feel fear when those things are not being met, when you don't have love, when you don't have shelter, food, things like that. So first and foremost, making sure those things are met. But yeah, fear creates violence. We need to know the difference between the fears that keep us alive and the fears that keep us from living. Fears that keep us alive, it's healthy, right? We've evolved these natural fears. You know, we stay away from danger, stay away from getting burned by fire, things like that. It's good, it's natural to have that kind of fear, but the other kind of fear that keeps you from living, that keeps you inhibited, that keeps you fearful and timid is what she's talking about. It's like the unfamiliar. So the unfamiliar can become an abundant place for exploration once we realize that this fear lives only in our imagination. It's not real, it's perceived. It's only our minds that have created the turmoil in our gut and kept us hostage to the possibility of our own lives. Endless possibilities, you guys. Endless possibilities. Really pretty cool to live in a world with endless possibilities. I mean, do you really believe that? I sometimes do, and then other times I am crippled by fear. Being real. To create a life and a world free of violence is first and foremost to find our own courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to be afraid without being paralyzed. So it's like, I've heard people say, you know, courage is, yeah, you still are feeling afraid, but you do it anyway. Like, I'll give a real life example. Right now we are, oh my God. Right now a bird is attacking me. Oh my goodness. It's a dove. All right. Maybe I'm in her space. Or maybe she was saying hello. That was funny because I was talking about fear. Okay, so that was a real life example, but also we are in the process of just like selling our house and most of our possessions. And we don't have a huge house, but we're actually downsizing. We have 4 kids. But we're trusting that like simplicity and minimalism is more enjoyable than putting up with and organizing stuff the rest of my life. I'm not into cleaning and organizing, spending my days doing that. I want to enjoy my life. Still fluttering around. Anyway, it's just kind of a scary space. The unknown, it's kind of unsettling so we're selling our house and then we're going to start building, and it's like this space in between where we're essentially homeless. I mean, we'll be fine, like we have plans, but it is unsettling to move, and it's that fear of the unknown, but doing it anyway. So like trusting that what I'm feeling that we are supposed to do, taking those steps and just one day at a time and moving through it, moving through the fear, moving through the shadow, the valley of shadows to get to the other mountain, is what I think being brave is, and I think it will pay off, and I think that you learn a lot in those seasons. The next little subtitle is creating balance. So courage demands our best self, and that is a self of balance. Balance is difficult to maintain. It's easy to perceive what balance looks like and what health looks like, but for me anyway, it's sometimes difficult to be consistent. Imbalance in our systems is almost a certainty for violence, which is what we're talking about, as the dis-ease we feel within finds its way to expression outward. And I really liked that. So when you feel dis-ease inside, when you're out of balance, when you're out of whack, it's only natural for the next thing it comes out. Whatever you feel inside comes out. The deep harmony of balance is my most precious commodity, and I guard it fiercely, says Dr. Phil Nurenberger. The deep harmony of balance is my most precious commodity, and I guard it fiercely. It is certainly a precious commodity. It is anti-cultural to claim any space that is simply space, or to move with any kind of lingering, or to take time for closure. That is so true, and I preach that, or like I mention that in my yin classes, because that's when we talk about like being still and finding space. It is so anti-cultural. It's like we're all about progress and what's next and how much can you do and how much can you accomplish, but it's like for what if you're not enjoying it. I am willing to go against the grain on that one and several other things, but especially on that, like just taking time for space. And it's hard for me too, because I grew up in this culture where it's like now I'm inclined to want to see progress and keep going, you know, like everybody else. But I realize that that doesn't feel good to do that all the time, and I want to feel good. So I'm moving more towards like space and balance. The repercussions are inescapable and measurable: violence to ourselves and those around us when we don't create time for rest and balance and like self-care. So we create this rest by allowing space that we can breathe in. Not more clutter, but more space. Space to reflect, space to journal, space for closure, space for imagination, and space to feel the calling of the life force within us. Can we get quiet enough in our days to feel that? I mean, what is the point of doing all of that if you can't enjoy it and sit back and evaluate and be still and listen? Balance will look different in each of us, and even different in each of us at different times. So yeah, it'll change, and I highlighted that because it is true. Balance looks different for everybody, and how much time away one person needs is different than another person. Like we all have different boundaries. When we are in balance, we automatically live in nonviolence. Balance is like this: spreading ourselves thin looks impressive, but in the end, we are the first to lose. And I have been there, done that, and it is tempting for me to go there. Yeah, so this is such a good reminder to find that balance and find that space for yourself. The next little subsection is dealing with powerlessness. I'm going to read a couple sentences here because I have this highlighted. One of the biggest challenges to maintaining balance is feeling powerless. Feeling powerless leads to outward aggression in the form of frustration and anger, or withdrawal inward into depression and victimization. So when you feel powerless, you're either usually prone to go to frustration and anger or victimization and depression. Which one do you go towards? We fear our own power, and we often feel trapped at our sense of powerlessness. By powerless, I mean those times when we feel like we've run out of choices. We've run out of options, and we're feeling totally incompetent to deal with the challenge at hand. At these times, we may feel like a caged animal. I have felt that before, trapped and ready to spring. Whether we respond with anger, withdrawal, frustration, or resignation, there is a way in which our mind shuts down, as if we are riding a train through a dark tunnel and we can't see anything but darkness and anxiety. So Ahimsa, or nonviolence, is asking us to question those feelings of powerlessness. We have a choice to take action, and we have a choice to change the story we are telling ourselves. We talked about that a second ago. Like, your thoughts and words create your reality. So you can change your story. You can set your mind. You can set an intention or a mantra at the beginning of your day or at any time in the day. If you catch yourself on a negative train going through a dark tunnel, turn your thought around so that it is more uplifting and loving towards yourself. I do that very often. What do I need to do right now to feel competent to handle this situation? Sometimes it's just that self-talk. Like, instead of, for example, like, if you're feeling overwhelmed or like powerless, and you have like a lot to do in a day, instead of being like, I am never going to get all this done, I knew I couldn't do it, I'm such a failure. That's a thought that will pop into my head a lot. And that's the old way I used to think, and I used to struggle so much with anxiety. And when I started to catch those, when I became my own therapist, sort of, and started to heal myself, that was one of the first things that I did, was changing my thought patterns, and I still work with that. So instead of that thought, I could say, like, I have a lot going on right now, and there's so much on my to-do list, and it's okay if I don't get it all done today. There will be time tomorrow. I'm really proud of myself for working hard and accomplishing my goals. Like, that feels so much better. And it's somewhat annoying that I even have to go through that, but I'm thankful, for the lessons that my negative thought patterns have taught me, and I'm thankful for the tools that I have been given to move with more ease through life and through those thoughts. And I share this with hopes that maybe it's helpful. So she's found 3 ways of thinking that shift her out of feelings of powerlessness, similar to what I just went through with you. So first she says practice gratitude, and then trust in the moment, and then think about others. So going back to that example, okay, practicing gratitude. I'm so thankful that I've been given all of these privileges that come with some responsibility. I'm so thankful, let's say even more nitty gritty, like, I'm so thankful that I have dishes to wash, that we had great meals together, that, this is evidence of that we have food. So that's the gratitude part. Trust in the moment. This moment is enough. I'm going to get what I need to get done in this moment, and I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and like being more in the moment. I've read, I think it was 1,000 Blessings was the book, and she talks about doing the dishes and how it's like such a mundane chore, but how you turn it into gratitude. And she talks about like the iridescent orb of bubbles and just getting really present with your task, or with whatever is making you feel like a caged animal, like having to do something you don't want to do. So practicing gratitude, trust in the moment, and then thinking about others. So maybe thinking about, wow, who's going to use this clean dish? I'm just making this up. Or, wow, what about those people who don't have all of these things, who don't even have a dish, or who don't have food to put in a dish? Or maybe thinking about, like I said, like the meals you're going to have in the future because you're doing this act of kindness. But you can apply that to anything. So when you're feeling powerless, she says, practice gratitude, trust in the moment, and think about others. Okay? One of the biggest challenges to maintaining balance is feeling powerless, she says. Nonviolence invites us to question the feeling of powerlessness rather than accept it. So when you feel that old story creeping in, when you feel those negative thought patterns, are you accepting them as truth, or are you able to catch them? The first thing is becoming aware of those thoughts, maybe writing them down if you're new to this, but becoming aware of, and then deciding, is this true? What about this is true? What about this thought is true? Am I just going to accept it? Not everything that we think is true. We all have the choice to tell a different story and grow ourselves up to take responsibility for our lives in a new and fresh way. So I love that, because you're not a victim. Even if you had, a difficult childhood and this is how you were programmed. Like, you can grow yourself up to take responsibility, become your own mother, become your own father. You know, you're an adult and you have to do this if you want to be better. And that's another thing I love about having my children with me, is that as I'm mothering them, I'm also able to come alongside my inner child and fill in any gaps that are there for myself, and nurture and love myself too. She mentions the words of Yogi Raj Akala. He says, I excite myself with my incompetencies. So when feeling powerless, like if you feel incompetent or like you're at a new task, I excite myself with my incompetencies. Because why? Because you're learning something new and you're developing in some way. You're evolving and moving, expanding. The next subsection is self-love. Talking about those stories and how we talk to ourselves. If you are a taskmaster with yourself, others will feel your whip. If you are critical of yourself, others will feel your high expectations of themselves as well. This is very true. If you are lighthearted and forgiving with yourself, others will feel the ease and joy of being with you. And isn't that what we all want? Is to feel easy and joyful and light. If you find laughter and delight in yourself, others will be healed in your presence. How can we find more of that? More of the self-forgiveness and love. How we treat ourselves is, in truth, how we treat those around us. We can be so harsh and demanding with ourselves and then expect to be loving with others. And that is one thing I was talking about, the accountability piece, even of this. Like, it's that accountability as a yoga teacher. Like, you're out there preaching to your students to be love, to be light, to be accepting of yourself and of others. And you can't, it's not real if you tell them that and then you're not actually practicing it yourself. People see right through you and it doesn't resonate, so you're just wasting your time. She talks about like the color of how we treat ourselves is the color of how you're going to treat everybody else. Like, if you get a can of paint and whatever color's on the inside is what color's going on the wall. Like, you can't have a color inside of you and expect what comes out to be a different color. It's very true. So she talks about a time in her life when she was just like really intense in her work, like a workaholic. And when she quit that work and began to bring some ease and pleasure back into her life, all of her relationships became more enjoyable and ease-filled. So again, becoming aware of your boundaries and how much time away you need and how to find that balance can help you with nonviolence towards yourself and others. She talks about falling in love with yourself, and like when you're falling in love with someone, if you've ever been in love, it's like the other person can do no wrong. Like in those first stages, it's just everything they do is awesome. She talks about like, can we do that with ourselves? Like, can we look at ourselves in that way and be delighted with ourselves? And like, can we have that much love and self-compassion? It's not a love that's egocentric. This is important, but it's a love that is forgiving and lenient. A love that sees the humor in the imperfections and accepts the fullness of the human expression. Human expression. We're all going through this together, and it's hard, and we're not perfect. And it's so much easier when you approach yourself in a loving way. Trust me, I've been on both sides. I used to not love myself at all. And it's been a journey the past years that has led me, and I'm not completely, full of love towards myself at all times, but I have a lot more love for myself than I used to, and it feels a lot better to be on this side of the fence. Guilt holds our love for self and others hostage and keeps us bound to a one-sided expectation of the human experience. And then I love this. She talks about Jesus's words, perfect love casts out fear. And I love that. That is just like the whole chapter right there. Perfect love casts out fear, because fear is the root of nonviolence. The opposite of fear is love. And I recently heard, like, we make all of our decisions based on love or fear. So wanting love, wanting to be loved, or feeling fear, feeling afraid, and wanting to avoid that. So think about that. The next section is violence towards others. When we are unwilling to look deeply and courageously into our own lives, we can easily violate others in many subtle ways that we may not even be aware of, thinking that we're actually helping them. So nonviolence asks us to trust the other. So it's like worrying about people is basically thinking that they're not going to be able to succeed, in your definition of success. Trusting that other person's journey and loving and supporting them rather than helping them. So being a support, coming alongside them, and letting it be the highest image of themselves rather than what you think that their highest is, highest and best. It asks that we stop managing ourselves, our experience, others, and others' experiences of us. Leave the other person free of our needs, free to be themselves, and free to see us as they choose. This is difficult as a parent from that perspective, and for anybody you love, but I think particularly for parents, because it's like, well, literally this kid came out of your body and it feels like it's part of you, and so you think you know because you've had more experience in life, like longer experience, I should say, more times around the sun. And so it's difficult to sometimes like step back and trust the process for them as much as you do for yourself. But when you're able to do that, you're like more able to enjoy just being with them rather than like trying to micromanage. She talks about a monkey with a fish in a tree, and the fish is like, obviously unable to breathe, and the monkey's like, but I saved you from drowning. Like, aren't you thankful? But all we can do is model, and that points the finger back at us. So just going back to yourself and living your best life. She talks about how her husband started carrying heavy things for her, and then she like lost all the muscle in her arms because she realized like she wasn't occasionally carrying heavy things like groceries and stuff. And while he's meant to help her, like, she needed to go through that. She needed to lift those things and carry them in order to have strength and use her muscles and joints. If you don't use it, you lose it. Okay, handling challenges like carrying heavy things can give us a sense of skill, self-esteem, and accomplishment. We need to trust suffering and trust the challenge and trust mistakes. They are what refine us when we don't run from them. Trust suffering, trust challenges, trust mistakes, trust the journey. Our listening creates a sanctuary for the homeless parts within another person. So sometimes people don't want help, they just want you to listen. And I heard this and I really like it because I like to help people, but sometimes people just want to talk to me because I'm a good listener, I think. And I found a lot of freedom and relief when I realized you don't have to fix their problem. People like to talk their way through. They like to figure it out on their own. They just want someone to listen and let them talk it out. And so unless someone specifically asks you for help, don't offer help. Don't be sitting there trying to find a solution. Just like be there to listen. That is the best gift. So like I mentioned a minute ago, worry is a lack of faith in the other and cannot exist simultaneously with love. Wow, worry can't exist simultaneously with love because you're not trusting and loving them. Worry is fear that hasn't grown up yet. It's a misuse of our imagination. Okay, we are coming to the end here. The next little subsection is developing compassion. We learn compassion as we stop living in our heads, where we can neatly arrange things, and we ground ourselves in our bodies, where things might not be so neat. Compassion moves across boundaries of established norms and often past the boundaries of safety, rushing headlong to do what it can to ease another's suffering. We grow gentle eyes that are not afraid to see reality as it is. Lucille Clifton once said, every pair of eyes facing you has probably experienced something you could not endure. So if you think about that, it's crazy to think about and very true. And she finishes up the chapter talking about a guy who was from Japan and he was super successful, but his best friend was too. They were like on the same path, and his best friend dropped dead of a heart attack, I think in his 30s. And this guy was like, I quit, and he started taking care of himself better. He was like really into his business, but he left it all behind, and now he runs marathons all the time. And when people asked how he accomplished the kind of stamina with no injury and no training, he said, with each step I touch the earth lightly to do her no harm, and she in turn does me no harm. So I'll read this last sentence. Whatever we find ourselves engaged in, this jewel of Ahimsa, or nonviolence, asks us to step lightly, do no harm, and to honor the relationship we have with the earth, with each other, and with ourselves. Beautifully written. I love this book. It's such an easy read. And I also love that at the end of each chapter, she gives questions for exploration. So I'm going to read through these, and I want you to pick one that resonates with you to work on until the next time you listen to a video on the next jewel, which is Satya, or truthfulness. So questions for exploration, and then we'll be done for today. Living with these questions, taking time for reflection, and journaling will give you new insights into your life and the practice of nonviolence. For this month, she says to read it month by month so you can digest it. It's a lot. Frame your exploration in the following statement by Eddie Hillesum, a young Holocaust victim. Ultimately, we have just one moral duty: to reclaim large areas of peace in ourselves, more and more peace, and to reflect it towards others. And the more peace there is in us, the more peace there will also be in our troubled world. That is beautiful. So week 1, the first prompt is to practice courage by doing one thing daily that you wouldn't normally do. I think this is a good, easy one. If you're feeling brave, make that one thing something that scares you. If you're feeling really courageous, get excited about the fact that you're scared and you're doing it anyway. So do something scary every day, basically. See if you can discern between fear and the unfamiliar. Watch what happens to your sense of self and how your relationships with others might be different because you courageously are stepping into unknown territory. So that's one option, is to practice something brave every day. Week 2, or the second option, is to guard your balance as you would your most precious resource. Don't find your balance from a place in your head of what it should look like. Instead, find guidance from the messages of your body. In this moment, do you need more sleep, more exercise? Do you need to eat differently? Do you need to pray? Do you need some variety? Act on the messages of your body. Listen and explore what balance looks like for this week. Notice the effects on your life and others. You could journal about these too. The third prompt is watch where you are running interference on others' lives. Are you a worrier, a fixer? Discern the difference between help and support. Notice what you might be avoiding in your own life because you're so interested in the lives of others. And the final prompt, or week 4, if you want to break this down into 4 weeks. For this whole week, pretend you are complete. There's no need to expect anything from yourself or to criticize or judge or change anything about you. No need to compete with anyone. No need to be more than you are or less than you are. Note your experience. Notice how much pleasure, kindness, and patience you can allow yourself to have with yourself. I love that. That was my intention the other night for my yoga practice. I am complete. And it does feel good to think that way and to know that deep within. So ponder those words by Eddie Hillesum and bring more peace inside of yourself to ultimately bring to the world. I hope that you enjoyed walking through Ahimsa nonviolence with me in this video, and I hope that you'll join me for the next 9 jewels as we go through the Yamas and Niyamas. Thanks for joining me. Namaste.